Okay, in this moment I give all glory to God. In part one of this, we've been talking about the laws of the universe. And a couple Sundays ago, I talked about Abraham Lincoln being a model and an ideal, an image of what's possible for us to have a visual experience in our life, a feeling inside of us that is really a possibility for us to become even more in our lives. Lincoln's mother taught him the wisdom of the beginning of wisdom is not imposed by discipline, but the beginning of wisdom is first of all the desire for discipline. It's the love of discipline in one's life and the voluntary choice of discipline. And he learned that that was the high road that leads to everything that makes life worth living. So when I say this, there's a principle at work here, and that is the harnessing of our powers toward a desired end. And we want to remember that's one of the reasons that we're here. What we're getting is God's principles, of which God is one itself. So most of us believe that the word sacrifice and discipline are totally misunderstood. I have come to understand sacrifice is not losing something but gaining something, giving up something of a lower nature to gain something from a higher nature. So having said that, let's go on with part two of the law of sacrifice. And we'll start with a story, since stories are really good to learn from. Bob Proctor has been a teacher of New Thought for quite a while, and he tells this story to help us understand the law of sacrifice. Bob states that he took the basic principles of this into consideration many years ago when he first started to teach this work in any kind of way, which was working with corporations, big businesses. He called on the Prudential America, who happened to be the largest insurance company in the world. And he found on a survey that he took of over 5,000 insurance agents, less than 3% of them were in front of a prospect before noon. Most of them didn't do that till later in the afternoon or evening. They had never had anyone of their district agents in over 100 years that had written $5 million in a year in business. And he thought the reason for this was they weren't going to work. So they thought they were going to work because they would go in the office and they were busy doing whatever they were doing. But they definitely weren't selling insurance to each other out in the world, so they were getting poor results. Now, Bob had learned that people on commission, if they're not in front of a prospect, they're unemployed. So he got the idea across to them, talking to them about it, and he showed them how we're all programmed to live in a certain way. And that program that we're living is either going to give us good results or negative results. But it is a program, and it can be changed. But it's been installed in our subconscious mind. So after working with them, and when they began to understand a little bit more about the subconscious mind and how it works, they started to look at their own lives. And they saw that it was really a series of habits. Isn't that what our life is like? We have a habit that we live by. And he showed them if they just would change 2 habits, their whole world would change. Now he told them, I don't know what you people are doing early in the morning before 9 o'clock, but I'm going to recommend that whatever it is you're doing, you change it. I recommend that you be in front of a real life prospect, shaking hands, not on the phone, before 9 o'clock in the morning. Now to do that, they had to give up something, sacrifice something. He didn't care if it was sitting around the kitchen table drinking coffee. They had to give that up. They had to get in front of a prospect. Therefore, they had to give up what they were doing and discipline themselves to do something new. That is a basic strategy for altering old paradigms that we've been living with, trying to get into something new, old habit patterns. So hardly anyone at that time was selling over $25,000 to $30,000 of insurance in those days. He had them commit to themselves that they would ask everyone that they got in front of to purchase the minimum of $100,000 in insurance, which was probably the least of what these people needed to properly protect themselves. So what happened? Well, let's think about it. First of all, they had to make a sacrifice. They had to get up sitting around the kitchen before 9 a.m. and they had to go out and get in front of a prospect and talk to them. They had to give up something to get something else. They had to give up something lower to get something higher. You cannot sit around the table drinking coffee and be in front of a prospect so you have to give up something and have discipline in your life to move into something new. And this is what they had to do. So that was the first step to make that change. The second one, he told them, was they had to stop doing whatever they were doing and selling policies at a low price and had to ask the person to purchase a minimum of $100,000. There was 2 habits they had to change. They had to give up something to discipline themselves to do something different. And they did. They started practicing it. He states that sales in that region went up by hundreds of millions of dollars over the coming year. And as a result, he was hired to work with the entire Prudential company over all of North America to help them change just 2 habits in their lives. Now, that's what this lesson is really about. So the first step of this lesson is to ask, what do you really want in your lives? What's important to you? Sit down and decide what you want, and then take a look at what you've got in your life and how do they match. And if you have trouble declaring your wants, because I've mentioned before that we do from our childhood, we were never taught that it's okay to ask for what you want. We have a lot of fears around that. If you're not sure what they are, then start with what you don't want, because we're pretty clear about that. I don't want this, I don't want this. So that can help us move into, this is what I want. And we go from there. Once you do that, then you can ask yourself, who am I being? And what am I doing to get what I want in my life? You're going to have to change some things. You're going to have to make sacrifices. You have to let some things go of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature from God. I believe the way that most of us have been programmed is to look at that word sacrifice and think of that we're giving something up, that we're losing something, we're having less, when the truth is exactly the opposite. Sacrifice is giving up something of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature. That indicates growth, right? So we're growing inside of ourselves. Now, if you remember the quote that I gave you in the beginning of the first talk said, "Straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads on to life." Now, that's a basic law that governs the universe. If we grow, the basic law that governs it is either we grow or we die. We create, we disintegrate. We live or we go in the other direction. Those are the choices. So if we want our sales to go up, if we want our health to feel healthier, if we want to build more meaningful relationships, if we want more prosperity in our life, if we want more growth in a company that we have, what are the rules? I just stated. You have to give up something old and claim something new. You've got to be involved in sacrifice to let something go of a lower nature to something of a higher nature. And you have to discipline yourselves to replace the old with something new. Another story to share with you about this part of law. For me, I had been a painting contractor for 22 years. And the last couple of years of doing that, I was wanting to let go of it and start my business as a relationship consultant and get into the work that I do now. And but I was doing both of them because I was too afraid to let go of the painting. It was easy to go and give a bid to somebody and say, this is how much it'll cost to paint your house inside or out. But now I'm wanting to do consulting work, and what's it going to be like for me to sit down in front of you and say, I can help you change your life. I can help you change 2 habits in your life. What's it worth to you or to me? What do I want to charge? And so it was going on for a little bit of time. And I knew I wanted to let go of painting. I wanted to let go of the old. I no longer expressed that. It wasn't me anymore. I wanted something new and to move forward in the business. So after about 1.5 years of doing that, I decided at the end of the year that I needed to say no to what I didn't want and yes to what I wanted at the beginning of the year. And I felt this fear inside, like, boy, I'm going to have to start saying no. The first person that called me was a guy who was a real estate agent and who I had done a lot of work for, because his clients, when they bought their houses, wanted it all redone again, and he gave me most of the time permission to do whatever needed to be done. And he called me up and I said, well, guess what? I don't do this anymore. Oh my God, I need somebody like you. And I said, well, you'll find somebody. I know you will. But all this fear started coming up. And finally I said, no, yes. And it felt so great to pick a higher part of myself now and let go of the old part of myself. It was a bit scary. But it was also strange and difficult changing the way of my work, because before, being a painting contractor, I would either be painting inside or outside of a house. And when we got a house done, I went to another house. So we were always in different areas. Now, I've let that go, and I'm in the office of my house, in the same office all day long, learning how to, attract clients and whatever kind of work I wanted to do. And it was difficult. I remember sometimes I would stop and go watch TV, doing something different, trying to get used to this old model. Sometimes I would take walks outside just so I could go out and breathe fresh air like I used to when I painted houses outside. So after a while, I kept focusing on what I wanted. This is what I want, and I kept letting go. When something come up that I didn't want, I have to say, I let it go, I let it go. A lower nature to go to a higher nature. The old business to a newer expression of myself. So, this is a wonderful lesson I'm talking to you about because it's about growth. It's about choosing who you want to be in your life and sacrificing the old stuff and letting go, and watch your attachment to what you have that may not be who you are anymore, and that you want to grow into something new. It's a marvelous lesson about growing our relationships as well. What is going on in relationships that no longer feed us that we need to change in our lives? Our income. What is there something about our income that's stopping us from receiving even more that we need to let go of? To always look at letting go of the lower, go to the higher. So I could take anyone and work with this lesson, just this lesson in itself, to change lives by gathering some information about you, get you to sit down and take a look at it, personalize it in your life, bring it in and ask yourselves, okay, this is what you want. What's going on? What are your results? What do you have to do to improve the results in your life? What do you have to do to stop doing the same old thing? What can you do to change something new in your life? Well, sacrifice and discipline would be two important processes and principles in growth. So the end of that quote that I shared with you earlier that said, let me read the first part. Straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads unto life. Few there be that find it. Why? Very few people will understand what I just talked about because they don't think about going new. There's still a part of them that's holding on to the old concept of how life was for them. Even if it wasn't giving them all that they want, they still believe that sacrifice is losing, so they don't want to make any sacrifices. They like it just the way it is. They want to stay the way it is. It's a status quo. I'm afraid to make changes, and I understand that. It's difficult, isn't it? To sit and say, I want something different in my life, and what do I have to let go of to make it happen? People get locked into a frequency that's not giving them what they really want. Now, this is really powerful information to really take in, and you might be saying, well, I'm thinking in my own life right now, it isn't that I don't have discipline. You probably do in some respects. It isn't that I haven't worked with that to a degree in my life. You probably have. And looking at your life, you might see instances of discipline that you have brought to bear in your own life before. But yet there's still a yearning in you to look at that yearning for the next version of what's possible. The difference that can make through the application of these laws. So what you need to do is help yourself by looking at the choices that you've made recently. Did they help you out? How positive were they for you? Did you learn something from them if it didn't work out? So I want you to encourage all of you that are listening to take this lesson personally. I know there are a lot of people in my position, meaning using it in their own life. I've taught it. There's other people, Bob Proctor, other people that have taught these laws in the universe. And some people may say, well, it's easy for you just to stand there and say it because you've got it all handled in your life. No, I don't. Just because I teach it or because anybody teaches it doesn't mean we've all got it. There's still things that we're continually learning because that's what New Thought is about. That's what growth is about. We get to learn new stuff all the time. So to begin to understand this principle of the law of sacrifice, think about the game of baseball shortly. When you sacrifice a first baseman for a home run, you never sacrifice a home run for a first base, do you? You have to give up something lesser for something greater. And when you look at it, you want to look at what's more expansive to you. What is it that you want to bring into your life? What is it going to be that's more powerful and life-giving to you? What choices do you need to make? No matter what version or frame of life you move yourself into, you lean towards that which is always more life-giving. That's what God wants for us. Everything that Spirit says for us is there, and it's more life-giving. So we want to claim it, move into it. And you lean towards that which is also a good picture or Lincoln image, which I talked about in the first part. What is the Lincoln image of your relationship? This Lincoln image of some area of your life. Look at that and then ask in your own life, what is my current experience? What is my current thinking around things in my life? My action, my behavior, my choices, are they congruent with the image of what I'm wanting to live in my life? Then I have to choose to sacrifice it, the old, through the practice of discipline. And as you harmonize and order your life and take the steps to really make it come in together, then you get a direct reflection of the I am consciousness, of the oneness with God, because it's God speaking through you. Now, some people might ask, does it have to be painstaking? It feels kind of painful to do some of that. Well, I'm sure it does. And it does because there's a part of us letting go of old habits that we've held on to for a while, and that can be painful. But it doesn't have to be, because it could be just easy if we begin to practice the art of discipline, practicing the presence, which is one of the classes I teach. Practice the presence of God within, and it gets easier and easier. Because back and forth, all the struggle we do with life just goes away. Wouldn't it be easy just to put your name on the check and let it come to you from God through the art of discipline? Just to say, here it is, write a check out for this amount, this is what I want in my life, and let it come, like I talked about a couple of weeks ago. Now, Lincoln have talked about, because he's an excellent choice that's put this point across. He knew about discipline, but he knew about something else in life too. He was not a popular guy when he was a president. He's more popular now after all these years of being president, but he was the president during a war time, and he wasn't a military man. So he was treated not popularly by the generals of his day, and many of the government leaders treated him terrible. He never let that bother him. A story that I read regarding General McCollum and Lincoln, where Lincoln wanted him to do something, and General McCollum wouldn't come to see him. So Lincoln went to see McCollum. But he wasn't there when he went to his house, so he was asked to wait into the parlor. Here's the president waiting for this general to come in. And the general came in, looked at him just sitting there, and walked right by him and went to bed. And later someone said, doesn't it bother you the way he treated you that way? And Lincoln said, no, I'll hold the general's coat if it helps me win the war. So he knew the steps that he was taking. He had his values in the right place for him. He had his objectives and his goals, and he knew the rules of the game. And how did he get that? His mother helped him out. She taught him some of these basic rules that sometimes most of us miss. So that's where sacrifice and discipline come in, beloveds. Getting the rules in, the laws of the universe, how God has everything working in perfect order for all of us, and incorporate them into our lives. And it becomes a paradigm shift. So I believe an appropriate way to end this series of the Law of Sacrifice is to share with you a poem by William Ernest Henry called Invictus. And you're probably sure you've heard the last part of it before. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters now how straight the gate, how charged with its punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. That's who we all are. So take this in, beloveds, and start making your lives the way you want it through these laws, including this one. Namaste.